Long ago, in a quiet Hausa village nestled between rolling hills, there lived a young woman named Amina. She was the pride of her family, born to a humble but respected farmer, Malam Ibrahim. While many of her brothers spent their days tending to the fields, Amina's love lay somewhere else. From a young age, she was drawn to her mother's craft, weaving, dyeing, and creating intricate fabrics that caught the eyes of many in the village. As a child, she would sit for hours by her mother's side, watching her deft hands twist thread, creating patterns that seemed to tell stories of their own. Over time, Amina learned the craft herself and became known throughout the village as not just a weaver, but a designer of beautiful clothes. Her skills surpassed even her mother's, and soon her designs were sought after by villagers far and wide. While her family was proud, Amina's success also caught the attention of others, both admirers and those who envied her talent. Among those who watched Amina closely was her childhood friend, Hawa. Hawa and Amina had grown up together, sharing secrets, laughter, and the dream of young girls. Hawa, though, had always been different. She came from a more modest home, and while she was beautiful and confident, she did not share the same success that Amina did. But Hawa was smart, and to everyone around her, she appeared supportive, always praising Amina's accomplishments. And so, life continued in the village, with Amina's fame growing. It was during one bustling market day that Amina met Usman. Usman was a trader, charming and well-spoken, with a shop filled with leather goods and metal work. His shop was always busy, and he had a way of drawing customers in with his easy smile and warm words. Amina had gone to the market to buy supplies for her mother's business when their paths first crossed. He greeted her with a smile that made her feel seen, and their conversation flowed effortlessly. As the weeks passed, Amina found herself visiting his shop more often. At first, it was for business, but soon, they began spending time together, walking through the market, talking late into the evenings. Before long, Amina found herself falling in love with Usman. He seemed kind, supportive, and understanding of her dreams. And yet, there was something else about him, something she couldn't quite place. A darkness hidden behind the charm that slowly began to reveal itself. It began subtly, almost unnoticeable at first. Usman would occasionally make little remarks, half-jokingly, about how much time Amina spent working. You know, he said one evening, as they walked back from the market under the soft glow of the setting sun, a woman shouldn't be so consumed by her business. After all, it's a man's duty to provide. Amina had smiled, brushing the comment off as a playful banter. She had heard these things before. Growing up in a community where many believed a woman's place was in the home, such statements were common. But from Usman, they seemed to carry a weight she couldn't ignore. His smile was there, but something about his tone left a coldness in her heart. As time passed, the comments became more frequent. Whenever Amina would talk excitedly about her business, about how her fabrics were becoming increasingly popular, or how traders from other villages were seeking her out, Usman's expression would shift. His smile became tight, his response caught. "That's good for now," he would say, his eyes slightly clipped. "But don't you think you should slow down? Focus on other things." "Other things?" Amina asked once, confused. "What do you mean?" Usman's eyes had darkened as he looked at her, a hint of irritation flashing across his face. "You know, marriage, family, It's not always about business, Amina. Amina felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't like where the conversation was heading. She had always imagined a life where she could have both, her work and a family. Why did it have to be one or the other? Of course, she replied cautiously, but I can still work while doing those things, can't I? There was a pause. Usman's silence was deafening. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out a soft chuckle, though there was no humor in it. You'll see, he said finally, his voice low. One day, you will understand that you can't have everything. Amina felt a shiver run down her spine. The words felt like a warning, but she didn't press further. She wanted to believe Usman had her best interest at heart, that he only wanted to protect her. After all, he had always seemed so supportive, hadn't he? But as the days turned into weeks, Usman's true nature began to emerge. The little comments turned into passive-aggressive criticism. Why do you spend so much time working? He would ask, his voice laced with frustration. A woman should focus on her home, not on trying to compete with men in the market. At first, Amina tried to reason with him, to explain that her work was more than just a job. It was her passion, her way of contributing to her family's legacy. But Usman never seemed to listen. Instead, he would dismiss her concerns, telling her that she didn't need to worry about such things. Let me take care of you, he would say, as if that were the solution to everything. Amina felt herself growing more isolated. The man she had fallen in love with was slowly becoming a stranger, someone who belittled her ambition and tried to mold her into someone she wasn't. The worst part was the gaslighting. Usman would make her feel as though she was the problem, that her desires to succeed were selfish. You are always so focused on yourself, he said one evening after a particularly tense argument. You never think about us. It's always about your business, your dreams. What about me? What about our future? His words stung, and Amina found herself questioning everything. Was she being selfish? Was she putting her work ahead of her relationship? She didn't know anymore. Usman had a way of twisting her thoughts, making her to doubt her own judgment. And then there was Hawa. Hawa, her best friend, had always been there for her. Or so Amina thought. Hawa seemed genuinely happy for her success, always cheering her on and offering words of encouragement. But as things with Usman grew more strained, Hawa's presence became more unsettling. At first, it was innocent enough. Hawa would join Amina when she visited Usman's shop, offering to help her carry supplies or simply keeping her company. But soon, Amina noticed that Hawa began visiting Usman even when she wasn't around. She would casually mention in passing, "Oh, I stopped by Usman's shop earlier today. He said to say hello." Amina didn't think much of it at first. After all, they were friends. But then, she began to notice little changes in Hawa. How she would bring up Usman in conversations more frequently. How her laughter seemed to linger a little too long when he was around. One day, while walking through the market, Amina spotted them together. Hawa and Usman standing close, talking in hushed tones. Amina's heart sank as she watched them. The way Hawa tilted her head, the way Usman's hand brushed her arm, it was all too familiar. Amina's stomach twisted with dread. She tried to push the thought away, telling herself it was nothing. But deep down, she knew something had shifted. Amina had always trusted Hawa, her dearest friend, the sister she never had. But now, that trust was shattered, crumbling into a betrayal so sharp it made her chest tighten. Usman, the man she had fallen deeply in love with, had turned his attention to Hawa. And Hawa, her closest confidant, had welcomed him with open arms. The sight of them together, laughing and whispering in the corner of Usman's shop, had set something off in Amina. The air seemed to freeze around her as she stood there, her heart pounding in her ears. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she saw was the betrayal right in front of her eyes. The two people she cared for most deceiving her. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up, and she stormed into the shop, her vision blurred with fury. Hawa and Usman were still in deep conversation, unaware of Amina's sudden presence. The betrayer stung even more up close, the sound of their shared laughter like nails scraping against her skin. With a swift, angry movement, Amina grabbed Hawa by the arm, the sudden force of it startling them both. Usman took a step back, his eyes wide with surprise. But Amina wasn't focused on him. Her grip tightened around Hawa's wrist as she dragged her outside, away from the shop and into the alley beside it, where no one would hear what was about to unfold. Amina, what are you doing? Hawa began, her voice quivering, but Amina cut her off, her own voice low, shaking with the weight of everything she had held back. Why? Amina's voice trembled, her breath coming in shallow bursts as she glared at Hawa. Why would you do this to me? Hawa blinked, feigning innocent, her expression carefully constructed as though she had no idea what Amina was talking about. Do what, Amina? What's going on? Don't play dumb, Amina's voice rose, her anger finally breaking through. She felt the heat in her chest, the burning sensation that had been building for days, weeks, as she watched her best friend grow closer and closer to Usman. You think I don't see it? The way you look at him, the way you smile at him. You went after the man I love. How could you do this to me, Hawa, after everything we've been through? Hawa's eyes flickered with something, a brief flash of guilt, or perhaps shame, but it disappeared just as quickly as it had come. She let out a shaky breath, pulling her wrist free from Amina's grip and rubbing the red mark it left behind. For a moment, she said nothing, her gaze shifting away from Amina as though she were deciding what to say. Then, with a deep sigh, she finally broke the silence. You think I'm the one who betrayed you? Hawa's tone was soft, almost pitying, and it sent a cold shiver down Amina's spine. You've always been so blind, Amina, so oblivious to what's been right in front of you. Amina's heart raced, her confusion mingling with the anger that still boiled beneath her skin. What are you talking about? Hawa's lip curled into a bitter smile, and her eyes, which had once been so kind and supportive, now gleamed with something darker, something Amina had never seen before: resentment. This isn't just about Usman, Hawa began, her voice dripping with a venom that cut to the core. This is about everything. All these years, you've had everything handed to you: success, love, admiration. You were always the center of attention, and I stood by, smiling, being the supportive friend, while you basked in it all. Amina took a step back, the words hitting her like a slap. She felt dizzy, as though the world around her was tilting. What? What are you saying? Hawa's smile faded, and her voice grew harder, colder. Do you remember when we were younger? There was a boy I liked. I admired him from a distance. Thought he might like me too, but then you came along. And just like that, he chose you instead. You even barely noticed him, did you? You were so caught up in your own world that you didn't even see how much it hurt me. Amina's mind raced, trying to recall what Hawa was talking about, and then the memory surfaced. It had been so long ago, a boy in the village, someone Amina had barely dated before it ended, barely leaving an impression on her. She had moved on easily, but clearly Hawa had not. That was years ago, Amina said, her voice faltering. I didn't even know. Exactly, Hawa snapped, cutting her off. You didn't know. You never bothered to notice. You've always had everything, and I've always been in your shadow. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Amina stared at her friend. No, not her friend anymore, but a stranger who had been hiding her resentment for years. Amina's chest tightened with a mixture of shock and sadness, but the anger hadn't left her. You are blaming me for something I didn't even know happened. Amina's voice shook, disbelief lacing every word. I've always supported you, Hawa. We've been through everything together, and now you are throwing all of that away for some petty grudge over a boy from our past. It's not just about him, Hawa said, her voice sharp. It's about how I've been second to you. Always, even now with Usman. You are the one he first wanted. And I'm tired of it, Amina. I'm tired of being second to you. Amina's eyes filled with tears, her heart breaking as the realization fully settled in. Hawa wasn't just jealous of my relationship with Usman. This had been building for years, and Amina had never seen it. So what? Amina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You went after Usman to punish me? To get back at me for something I didn't even realize I did? Hawa looked away, unable to meet Amina's gaze. I didn't plan for it to happen this way, but when Usman started showing interest, I thought maybe this is my chance. Maybe it's my turn to have something you don't. Amina felt a tear slip down her cheek, her heart aching in a way she hadn't thought possible. I never wanted to compete with you, Hawa. You were my friend. Hawa's face softened for a moment, a flicker of regret flashing across her face, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by the same cold expression. Maybe you should have noticed sooner. Amina's hand clenched into fist at her side. She had had enough. The betrayal, the jealousy, the years of hidden resentment. It all weighed heavily on her now, but she wasn't going to let it break her. Without another word, Amina turned on her heels and walked away, leaving Hawa standing alone in the alley, her heart heavy with her resolve, stronger than ever. She didn't need Hawa, and she certainly didn't need Usman. They could have each other. As Amina walked away, her tears dried, replaced by a fierce determination. She had worked too hard, come too far to let anyone take her down. Not Hawa, not Usman, no one. As Amina walked away from Hawa, leaving her standing in the narrow alleyway with the echoes of their confrontation hanging in the air, she felt the sting of betrayal still burning in her chest, but she refused to let it break her. Each step she took away from Hawa was a step towards reclaiming herself. The pain was raw, but Amina was no stranger to challenges. She had overcome obstacles before, and this too would pass. In the weeks that followed, she buried herself in her work. She poured her soul into every project, every opportunity that came her way. Her career, once driven by passion, now became an outlet for the emotions she refused to let overwhelm her. The long hours, the sleepless nights, the endless meetings, these became her sanctuary, a place where her mind could find clarity amid the chaos. With time, Amina's business began to flourish even more. Clients were drawn to her determination and unmatched creativity. Her reputation grew, and soon she was fielding offers from some of the most prestigious names in her industry. She was no longer just Amina, the hardworking woman with big dreams. She had become a force to be reckoned with, a name that inspired admiration and respect. Yet, as her career soared, Amina realized that life wasn't just about work. The betrayal had left her feeling isolated, and she knew she couldn't heal if she continued to shut herself off from the world. She began to seek balance. She allowed herself to make new friends, people who supported her and brought joy into her life without any hidden agendas. She rediscovered the simple pleasures of life, taking up hobbies she had long abandoned in the whirlwind of work. Gardening, hiking, painting. Each new experience helped her reconnect with the world around her, grounding her in the present and helping her heal. Her heart, once wounded, began to mend. The bitterness she had felt toward Hawa and Usman slowly faded, replaced with a quiet acceptance. She no longer needed to dwell on their betrayal. Instead, she chose to focus on the things that brought her peace and happiness. Amina learned to let go, not just of the pain, but of the idea that she needed anyone to validate her worth. She was enough. Meanwhile, word reached her that Hawa had married Usman in a grand ceremony. The gossip made its round, but Amina remained unbothered. She didn't attend, of course. Instead, she kept her focus on herself, her business, and the people who genuinely cared about her. She had no time for lingering in the shadows of someone's choices. As time passed, rumors of Hawa and Usman's perfect marriage began to unravel. Beneath the glamorous facade, their relationship was anything but ideal. Amina heard true whispers in the community that Usman had begun to show his true colors. The man who had once charmed Hawa with sweet words and grand gestures had turned cold, demanding and condescending. Hawa, who had once thrived on confidence and attention, now seemed diminished, her spark, her vibrancy slowly fading under the strain of Usman's growing cruelty. It started with small criticism, cutting remarks that belittled her in public and private. Usman's temper flared often, and he exerted control over every aspect of Hawa's life. Her opinions no longer mattered. Her desire was secondary to his. Over time, the marriage that had seemed like such a victory became a prison, and Hawa found herself trapped, suffocated by the man she once fought so hard to win. Amina, however, was no longer interested in the drama of their lives. She was too focused on building something far more important, herself. She continued to nurture her business, growing it beyond even her own expectations. There were moments, of course, when Amina thought about love. She wasn't opposed to the idea of finding someone new, but it was no longer a priority. Her happiness wasn't contingent on being with someone. It came from within. She was open to love, but only if it came in her terms. For now, she was content with the version of herself she had become, independent, successful, and at peace. And there you have it, a powerful story of resilience, growth, and self-worth. Amina's journey reminds us that sometimes life's toughest challenges pushes us to become the best version of ourselves. Betrayal and heartache may stink, but how we choose to rise from these moments will define our strength and character. The lesson here is clear. Never let anyone or any circumstance diminish your value. Focus on your growth, your happiness, and the things that truly matter. What other lessons did you take away from this story? Be sure to drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to subscribe to African Folktales by Nychi and hit the notification bell so you are the first to know when new stories are released. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.